I have $1.43. Is that enough for soup? A 5-year-old girl asked. 13 black cars, gleaming like obsidian, sat silent in the parking lot outside, their engines still warm. 13 men in tailored suits, worth more than most people's yearly salary, filled the corner of the small roadside diner, their faces carved from stone, eyes that had watched men beg for their lives without flinching. Helen, the owner, had already reached for the phone beneath the counter to call the police when a little girl walked straight to the largest table, opened her tiny palm, and let the coins spill onto the wood one by one, clinking like small broken bells. Every man at that table froze. Even the sizzling from the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. The boss's gaze dropped to the oversized paper wristband clutched in the child's red fingers, a faded hospital tag belonging to her mother that the girl had kept as if it were a lucky charm. He read the last name printed in black ink, and his throat tightened like a fist had closed around it. Ashford. For a moment, nobody moved. The girl stood there with her chin raised as if she'd practiced being brave in front of a mirror, her cheeks chapped and raw from the cold, her jacket torn at the shoulder and far too thin for January, her small fingers red and trembling from the freezing wind outside. Constantine slowly pushed the coins back toward the child as though they might shatter if he touched them too hard. Hey, little one. What's your name? Willa, sir. How old are you, Willa? 5, sir. Are you here by yourself? Willa nodded once, then quickly corrected herself. No, sir. My mommy's here. But she can't get up. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what happens next. Now let's get back to what Constantine discovered when he followed this little girl into the snow. Constantine stared straight into the child's eyes that looked far too old for her age. Where's your mom? Willa swallowed, her voice so small it sounded like she was afraid someone might hear. Pinewood Motel, room 17, near the ice machine. Constantine nodded slowly, letting nothing show on his face. What's wrong with your mom? Willa lowered her head to the coins on the table, her tiny fingers absently turning one coin over and over, as if she needed something, anything, to hold on to. Mom's really hot. Mom said she's okay. The little girl paused, her lower lip trembling, but she isn't okay. The way Willa said those last 3 words made Constantine feel like someone had just punched him in the chest. That wasn't the voice of a 5-year-old. It was the voice of someone who'd gotten used to seeing the things she feared most, and being unable to do anything about it. He turned to Helen behind the counter, her hand still resting on the phone. 2 bowls of soup. 1 here, 1 to go. Add bread. He pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and set it on the table without looking. Keep the change. Helen hesitated for a second, then nodded and disappeared into the kitchen, almost like she was grateful for an excuse to leave that heavy air behind. Willa looked at the bill, then at Constantine, her eyes briefly confused, like she couldn't understand why a stranger would do that. When the hot bowl of soup was set in front of her, Willa didn't dive in the way other hungry kids would. She stared at it for a moment, as if she was waiting for someone to snatch it away. Then she lifted the spoon with both hands, took a small sip, and her shoulders dropped just a little, not because it tasted good, because it was relief. Constantine watched her eat, his chest tightening with every spoonful she swallowed. Is someone with your mom? Willa stopped. The spoon froze in midair. Her eyes darkened for a moment, like a sky before a storm. Yes, Travis. The way she said that name wasn't how a child talked about a grown-up in the family. It was how people talked about bad weather, about something you couldn't control, only endure and pray would pass fast. Constantine kept his voice steady, even though inside him he was starting to go cold in a way he knew too well, the kind of cold that came whenever he was about to do something violent. Is Travis good? Willa didn't answer. She lowered her head and took another spoonful, like she could swallow the question down with it. That silence was louder than any answer. Constantine didn't ask again. He'd seen enough victims in his life to know when fear was bigger than the ability to say it out loud. Outside the glass door, a patrol car rolled slowly into the lot, the engine still running, its lights off, like a beast stalking prey. Helen looked out, and her face went pale as if she'd just seen a ghost. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Deputy Sheriff Webb." The bell over the door rang when Webb stepped in, bringing January cold with him and something even colder in his eyes. He was around 50, his police uniform pressed crisp, his badge shining like it had just been polished, a friendly smile sitting on his mouth that never once reached his eyes. Those eyes swept the diner in a slow circle, paused on the corner table where 13 men sat, then dropped to Willa clutching her bowl of soup. His expression shifted instantly, the fake warmth gone, replaced by something wary and controlling, like an owner spotting his property in a stranger's hands. Webb walked up to Constantine's table and stopped a few steps away. Close enough to talk, far enough not to be seen as picking a fight. He looked at Willa first, then finally at Constantine. Quite a few cars for a little place like this. Where you folks from? Constantine didn't stand, didn't change a thing about his posture, only lifted his coffee and took a slow sip, as if Webb wasn't worth his attention. We're eating. Webb nodded, the smile still hanging there. His eyes slid back to Willa. Ah, little Willa. You out here all by yourself again? Travis is gonna worry. Willa shrank into herself, hugging the soup bowl like it was the only thing keeping her safe. She didn't say a word, only lowered her head even more. Webb turned to Constantine, his voice staying friendly, but with an edge tucked underneath. Thanks for feeding her. But this kid's got someone looking after her already. Her mom's a bit complicated, you understand? Best if outsiders don't get involved in other people's family business. Constantine set his coffee down and looked Webb straight in the eyes for the first time. If a 5-year-old has to count out coins to buy soup, then whoever's looking after her isn't doing a very good job. Webb's smile vanished for half a second, revealing something hard and dangerous underneath. Then it slid back into place like it had never left. He stepped closer and lowered his voice so only Constantine could hear. Mr. Volkov, don't think I don't know who you are. You've got power in Chicago, I get it. But this isn't Chicago. This is my county. You pass through, you spend money, you leave. You don't follow that girl back to the motel. You don't knock on anyone's door. You don't turn my day into trouble. Constantine didn't blink, didn't move, only watched Webb with the kind of look that everyone who's ever seen it understands. The look of a man who's afraid of nothing in this world. I don't like being told what to do. Webb held that stare for 1 second, 2. Then he was the first to break it. He took a step back, the smile returning, but now it looked tighter, more forced. Enjoy your meal, and keep things peaceful. He turned and walked out, the bell ringing again as the door shut behind him. The patrol car started up and rolled out of the lot, but it didn't go far, only parked across the road like a reminder. Willa set down her empty bowl, both hands gripping the bag of soup to go that Helen had prepared. She slid off the chair and looked at Constantine with eyes that weren't scared anymore, only tired. Thank you, sir. I have to go back to my mom now. Constantine looked at her, wanting to say something, but not knowing what. She turned and ran to the door. The bell rang, and that small shape disappeared into the white curtain of snow outside. Jonas, the man sitting to Constantine's right, spoke softly. Boss? Constantine didn't take his eyes off the door. Follow the girl. Only 2 of you. Quiet. Don't let anyone see you. Pinewood Motel sat on the edge of town like a wound people tried to forget. 2 stories. Peeling paint. A neon sign that only managed to light up half a word. A parking lot full of potholes glazed over with frozen water. Constantine and Jonas parked 50 meters away. Far enough not to draw attention. Close enough to see every door clearly. The snow fell heavier, and the wind slipped through the seams of the car like small knives. Willa ran across the lot, her canvas shoes soaked through, the bag of soup pressed tight to her chest. She looked around once, the reflex of someone who'd gotten used to being watched. Then she slipped into room 17. The door shut behind her. There was no light in the room, the curtains were torn, and there was no sign of life inside except for the small, dark shape that had just vanished past that door. Jonas pulled out his phone, his finger moving fast across the screen. A few minutes later he spoke, voice low. This motel's under Webb's control. He owns a piece of it, and collects protection money on the rest. Nobody here dares to so much as clear their throat without his permission. Constantine didn't say a word, his eyes still fixed on the door to room 17. Travis Hendricks. Jonas kept reading. 42. Former Chicago cop. Fired 6 years ago for excessive force. 2 prior charges for domestic violence. Both times Webb stepped in. Suspended sentence. Works as a private investigator now, but mostly he's Webb's muscle for the dirty jobs. Has a gun permit. Constantine still didn't speak. He only watched. And waited. 3 hours passed like 3 years. The snow kept falling, whitening the roof of the car, whitening the whole world outside. Inside the car it was warm from the heater. But Constantine felt cold, a cold that didn't come from the weather. Close to 7 in the evening, an old pickup truck tore into the lot, tires grinding over ice, and stopped hard in front of room 17. The driver's door opened. Travis Hendricks stepped out. He was big, broad-shouldered, his belly starting to round from beer and liquor. His face was flushed, his eyes dull, and he walked with the unsteady sway of a man who'd drunk more than his body could carry. He didn't knock. He kicked. The door flew open and slammed into the inside wall with a bang. Travis's shouting spilled out, cutting through the car's glass. "Where the hell did you send Willa? Who said you could let her go outside?" Something shattered. A woman's groan followed, thin and weak, like someone who'd run out of strength to fight back. Then Willa's voice, the sound of her crying, begging. I'm sorry. Mom needed to eat. I just wanted to buy soup for Mom." A slap cracked through the air, sharp and brutal. The girl shrieked, then went quiet, like she'd already learned that crying louder only made everything worse. Constantine crushed the steering wheel in his grip. His knuckles went white, the tendons in his hands standing out like rope. In his chest, something was growling, demanding to be let loose, wanting him to step out of the car, kick that door down, and teach Travis Hendricks what real pain felt like. But he didn't. Not yet. Travis had a gun. Inside there was a sick woman and a 5-year-old. If he rushed in now, with no plan, no preparation, someone would get hurt, or worse. And he couldn't let that happen, not to someone with the name Ashford. 10 minutes later, Travis came back out and slammed the door shut. He stood in front of it, lit a cigarette, drew in a long breath, then shouted into the room. "I'm gone for 2 hours. If you let that little brat run outside again, when I come back, I'll deal with both of you. You hear me?" There was no answer from inside. Travis gave a short, ugly laugh, tossed the cigarette into the snow, climbed into his truck, and drove off. The pickup disappeared into the night. Constantine watched until the taillights were nothing but 2 tiny red dots, then vanished completely. He turned to Jonas. 2 hours. That's enough. Constantine stepped out of the car, Jonas close behind him. Snow came down in a white blur, settling on the shoulders of his black suit, like it wanted to erase the darkness he carried. He crossed the parking lot and stopped in front of room 17. Inside was silence, the heavy silence of places that had seen too much pain. He didn't kick the door like Travis. He knocked softly, 3 times, loud enough for whoever was inside to hear, not loud enough to scare them. A long pause. Then the door cracked open a thin slit, just wide enough for one eye to look out. Willa. There was a fresh red handprint on her cheek, still sharp, not yet fading into a bruise. Her eyes were swollen, but there were no tears left, like she'd cried out everything she had. She looked at Constantine, hesitating. Then she recognized him. "You were at the diner. You gave me soup." Constantine nodded, his voice gentler than he'd spoken to anyone in 10 years. "I want to see your mom." Willa watched him for another second, like she was weighing something. Then she opened the door wider and stepped aside. Constantine walked in and went still. The room was small and dark, the smell of dampness mixed with sickness. A single bed was shoved against the wall, the sheets gray from age, a plastic chair with a broken leg, a small table holding a few empty pillboxes. And on the bed, a woman lay motionless. Maren Ashford. He knew it was her even though he'd never met her. Stefan had described his sister so many times that Constantine could picture her in his sleep, but Stefan had never described her like this. Maren was so thin her cheekbones rose sharp under her pale skin. Sweat soaked her hair, plastering it to her forehead, her neck. Her breathing rasped, heavy and wet, each breath a fight. There were finger-shaped bruises on her throat, and on her arms, purple marks layered over each other, old and new, like a map of beatings already lived through. Then she opened her eyes, dull, unfocused, like someone trapped between fever and nightmare. But those eyes... Constantine felt like someone had torn his chest open. They looked like Stefan's, exactly like his. The same warm brown, the same way of looking as if they were always searching for something good in this world. "Maren," he said, his voice rough. Maren didn't look at him. She turned her head to the side, her eyes wild as they searched. "Willa, where's Willa?" Willa ran to the bed, climbed up, and grabbed her mother's hand with both of her tiny hands. "I'm here, Mom. I'm here. I got soup for you. You have to eat," Maren cried, tears sliding into her temples, but there were no sobs. She was too weak to cry out loud. Konstantin stepped closer and pressed his hand to Marin's forehead. Hot like fire burning inside her. She needs a hospital, right now. Willa shook her head hard, her eyes filled with fear. No, we can't. Travis said if Mom goes to the hospital, people will ask questions. They'll call the police, and then they'll take me away. I don't want to be taken away. I want to stay with my mom. Konstantin knelt beside the bed and brought his eyes level with Willa's. Nobody's taking you anywhere. I promise. Willa stared at him, eyes too old to belong to a child. Grown-ups promise a lot. Then they forget. Then they leave. Then there's nobody. Konstantin held that look without flinching, without excuses. I made a promise to your uncle, your mom's brother. His name was Stefan. Willa's eyes went wide. Even Marin's, hazy with fever, sharpened for a heartbeat. Konstantin went on, his voice low and steady. Stefan saved my life. Before he died, he told me to protect your mom. I've been looking for her for 8 years. I came too late, but I'm here now. And I don't forget. I won't forget this time. Konstantin slid one arm under Marin's back and the other beneath her knees, lifting her off the damp, mildewed bed. She was so light he nearly staggered, because he'd braced himself for so much more. Light like a child. Light like someone who hadn't been fed properly in a very, very long time. Willa stayed glued to his side, her tiny hand clenched around the hem of her mother's shirt as if, the moment she let go, her mother would disappear. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask anything at all. She only followed, silent, her eyes locked on Marin's pale face. Jonas already had the back door open. Konstantin laid Marin inside, gentle as if he were setting down something that could shatter. Willa climbed in after them and sat on the floor, both arms wrapped around her mother's arm, her head resting against Marin's shoulder. Konstantin took the front seat while Jonas drove. The car pushed into the white wall of snow, tires grinding on ice, heading toward the center of the city. St. Catherine Hospital, Konstantin ordered. Jonas nodded and sped up. St. Catherine was the best private hospital in Chicago, the place Konstantin donated millions of dollars to every year, the place where nobody dared ask him questions he didn't want to answer. Halfway there, Marin jolted awake. She flinched, eyes snapping wide with panic, her body going rigid. She looked around and saw herself in a strange car, in the arms of a strange man, and she did what instinct told her to do. She shoved, she fought, her voice raw from fever and fear. Don't touch me. Please don't. Konstantin didn't let go, and he didn't squeeze any tighter. He only held her enough to keep her from falling, his voice low and calm. Marin, it's Konstantin, Stefan's friend. She stopped struggling. That name, Stefan, like a key turning in a lock deep inside her mind. Her eyes searched for Konstantin's, unfocused but filled with desperate hope. Stefan, he talked about you. He said if anything happened, find Konstantin. Tears slid down her cheeks, mixing with sweat. But I couldn't find you. I couldn't find anyone. Travis did. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Konstantin understood. Travis had isolated her, cut off every line of contact, taken her phone, her papers, her money, turned her into a prisoner inside her own life. And he, the man who'd promised Stefan, had searched for 8 years and never found her. I came too late, Konstantin said, his voice heavy as stone, but I'm here now. Marin grabbed his hand, her fingers weak and trembling, but holding on like someone drowning around a life ring. Willa, she whispered. Save Willa. Don't let Travis take her. He'll kill her. Or worse. She passed out before she could finish, her body going limp in Konstantin's arms. Willa sobbed in the back seat, her cries small as a kitten's, like she'd learned how to cry without making noise. Konstantin stared out the window at the blinding white snow. And he remembered, 8 years ago, a dark alley on the south side of Chicago. Stefan had been on the ground, blood spreading red and soaking his shirt, 2 bullets in his chest. He'd thrown himself in front of Konstantin during an ambush nobody had seen coming. Konstantin had knelt beside him, pressing his hands over the wound in a useless attempt, the blood still pouring through his fingers. Stefan had gripped his wrist, the strength fading but his eyes still burning bright. My sister, Marin. She needs protection. You hear me. Promise me. Konstantin had promised, and Stefan had died with that promise. He'd looked for Marin for 8 years. hired private investigators, bought information, tore through every record he could reach. But Marin Ashford had seemed to vanish off the face of the earth. Now he knew why. Travis Hendricks had buried her in a rotten motel at the edge of town, cut her off from the world, turned her into a ghost while she was still alive. But now he'd found her, and he wasn't going to lose her again. If you're following this story, please hit like and subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. Now let's go back and see what Constantine discovers when he gets Marin to the hospital. St. Catherine Hospital blazed with light in the snowy night, a building of glass and steel rising like a fortress of life in a city drowning in darkness. Constantine carried Marin through the emergency entrance, Willa running close beside him, her hand still clenched around the hem of her mother's shirt. The nurses recognized Constantine instantly, not because he was famous, but because his name was engraved on the gold plaque in the main lobby, the man who donated millions of dollars every year. Nobody asked unnecessary questions. A gurney was rushed out. Marin was placed on it, and she disappeared behind the emergency room doors in less than 2 minutes. Dr. Raymond Shaw, the head of the emergency department, a 50-year-old man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much, took the case himself. Constantine stood in the hallway, his back against the wall, his gaze locked on the closed door. Willa sat on a plastic chair beside him, her feet not reaching the floor, both arms still wrapped around the bag of soup that had gone cold long ago. She didn't speak. She only stared at the door and waited, like a small animal that had learned to expect the worst. 1 hour passed. 2. The door opened. Dr. Shaw stepped out, pulled off his gloves, his face giving nothing away, but his eyes heavy. He looked at Constantine, then at Willa, then back at Constantine. "Mr. Volkov, I need to speak with you privately." Constantine glanced down at Willa. She was looking up at him, wide-eyed, waiting. "Jonas, sit with the child," he ordered, then followed Dr. Shaw out of earshot. Shaw stopped at the end of the hallway, his voice low and grave. "Her condition is very bad, Mr. Volkov. Severe pneumonia, and it's starting to turn into sepsis. Severe malnutrition. Her body doesn't have enough reserves to fight the infection." Constantine stood still, saying nothing, waiting for the rest. He knew there would be more. Shaw went on. "We also found 2 broken ribs that are in the process of healing on their own, along with multiple older injuries that still haven't fully healed. Bruises at different stages, some only a few days old, some weeks old. Mr. Volkov, these are signs of ongoing abuse over a long period of time." Constantine wasn't surprised. He'd known the moment he saw the bruises on Marin's throat, the moment he heard Willa crying sorry in that dark motel room, but hearing a doctor say it out loud, each word placed carefully, still made him feel like someone was tightening a steel wire around his chest. "Will she live?" Shaw was quiet for a moment. "It wasn't a good silence. We're doing everything we can, but I have to be honest with you. Her body is exhausted. If she'd come in a week earlier, the odds would be different. Right now, I can only say about a 60% chance. 60%, 40% she dies. Almost half." Constantine turned his back, not wanting Dr. Shaw to see his face right now. His hand clenched, his nails biting deep into his palm. Pain, but it was nothing compared to what was ripping through his chest. He'd come too late. Again. "Is there anything else?" His voice was flat, empty. The voice of a man who'd learned to hide everything. Shaw added one more thing. "Under Illinois state law, the hospital is required to report any suspected abuse to Child Protective Services, both for the mother and the child. We've already filed the report. Someone will come in the morning." Constantine nodded once, and walked away without another word. He returned to the hallway, to where Willa sat. She lifted her face to him, her eyes dry but full of fear. "Is my mom gonna die?" That question, from the mouth of a 5-year-old, carried no trembling, no tears, only a terrifying kind of familiar acceptance, as if she'd asked it 100 times in her head and had already prepared herself for the worst answer. Constantine crouched down and brought his eyes level with hers. "The doctors are doing everything they can. Your mom's fighting." Willa stared at him without blinking. "But if she dies, where do I go?" Constantine opened his mouth, but no words came out. He, the man who'd given orders to hundreds, the man who'd faced death more than once without shaking, couldn't find an answer for a 5-year-old. Willa didn't wait for one. She lowered her head, hugged the bag of soup that had gone ice cold, and fell silent. Travis kicked room 17's door wide open, the crack of wood slamming into the wall echoing down the empty motel hallway. He flipped on the light. The bed was empty. The room was empty. No Marin. No Willa. Only the empty soup bag on the floor and the stale trace of sickness still hanging in the air. He stood there for 1 second. 2. His brain trying to process what he was seeing. Then rage ignited like gasoline catching fire. He punched the wall, punched the door, and kicked the broken plastic chair clear across the room. He yanked out his phone and dialed Webb, his hand shaking with fury. Webb picked up after the second ring, his voice calm, mildly irritated at being bothered. "What?" "That bitch ran," Travis screamed into the phone, spittle hitting the screen. "Her and the kid. Gone. Somebody took them. You said you controlled everything here." Webb went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "Calm down. Let me check." 10 minutes later, Webb called back. "Bad news. She's at St. Catherine Hospital. Checked into emergency 3 hours ago." Travis ground his teeth. "Then I'll go there and drag them back." "No." Webb cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You don't understand who you're up against. The man who brought her to the hospital is Konstantin Volkov." Travis went dead quiet. He knew that name. Who in Chicago didn't? Volkov. Russian mafia boss. People said he owned half the city, and the other half was afraid of him. People said he could have someone killed with a phone call, and never have to wash blood off his own hands. Volkov. "Volkov," Travis repeated, his voice less wild now. "Why's he involved?" "I don't know and I don't care," Webb said. "But if you think you can storm into his hospital and pull that kid out, you'll be dead before you touch a hair on her head." "Then what?" Travis growled. "I want Willa back. She's mine. I raised her for 5 years. Do you hear what that sounds like?" It was the sound of an owner demanding his property. Webb gave a thin chuckle on the other end. "You want the kid? I'll get the kid for you. But not with a gun. With the law. Volkov's got money. He's got guns. He's got men. But he doesn't have what I have." Travis waited. Webb went on. "I've got Judge Harrison. The county court is in my pocket. I can make paperwork that says Marin Ashford's lost temporary custody due to drug use. And you, Travis Hendricks, get appointed by the court as Willa's temporary guardian." Travis started to see it. A slow smile spread across his mouth. "With that paperwork, I can go to the hospital and demand the kid legally." "Exactly," Webb said. "Volkov can kill 100 men without blinking. But he can't do a damn thing when I show up with a court order and police at my back. He resists. He's obstructing justice. He lays a hand on you. He's assaulting an officer. No matter what he does, he loses." Travis laughed out loud, the sound filling the empty motel room. "How long till you've got the papers?" "Tomorrow morning," Webb said. "Judge Harrison will sign anything I put in front of him. As for you, go home and sleep. Don't do anything stupid tonight. Tomorrow morning, you'll have your kid back." Travis ended the call and looked around the empty room one more time. He was going to have Willa back. And when he did, he'd teach that little girl what it cost to run. Night settled in, and the hospital sank into that thick, heavy quiet that only places where people fight between life and death can hold. The hallway lights were dim, the steady rhythm of machines drifted out from patient rooms, and the nurses' footsteps passed now and then like ghosts sliding through. Marin had been moved from the ICU to a private room, temporarily stabilized, Dr. Shaw had said, but he'd also added that she was still critical and not out of danger yet. Konstantin sat on the hard chair outside Marin's room, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the empty air in front of him. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Inside the room, through the small window in the door, he could see Marin lying motionless on the bed, an IV line in her arm, the heart monitor blinking in a steady rhythm. She still hadn't woken since she'd passed out in the car. Willa lay curled up on a small sofa in the waiting area a few steps away, covered in Konstantin's black suit jacket. It was far too big for her, swallowing almost her entire body, leaving only her small face exposed, cheeks marked by the handprint that had already darkened into bruises. She was asleep, but even in sleep her brow stayed drawn tight, like nightmares wouldn't let go of her even with her eyes shut. Konstantin's phone vibrated. He checked the screen. "Ilya," he answered, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't disturb the hospital's stillness. "What?" "Boss, the Italians are getting impatient." Ilya's voice was tight. "The meeting's been pushed twice already. They think you're disrespecting them. They're talking to someone else." "Push it again," Konstantin said. "I've got something to handle." Silence on the other end. Then Ilya spoke again, his surprise leaking through. What could possibly matter more than $20 million? Family, Konstantin said. Ilya gave a short, mocking laugh, but it died when he realized Konstantin wasn't joking. Family. Boss, you don't have a family. Konstantin looked toward Willa as she slept, the little girl shifting in her sleep, her tiny hand gripping the edge of the jacket like it was the only thing that could protect her. Maybe I do now, he said, and ended the call. He sat there in the dark, and memory dragged him backward even though he didn't want it to. The slums on the south side of Chicago, 30 years ago. 2 10-year-old boys in a world with no place for weakness. Konstantin was the child nobody wanted, the son of an alcoholic prostitute and a nameless man. Stefan was poor too, but he had parents who loved him, and he had a little sister named Marin that he always talked about with a soft look in his eyes. They'd met in a fistfight outside an alley, standing on the same side against bigger boys, and after that they never separated. Stefan was the only one who treated Konstantin like a human being, not trash, not something meant to be thrown away. When Konstantin grew up and began building his empire with blood and violence, Stefan refused to join. I don't want to live like that, he'd said. But you're my brother. If you need me, I'll be there. And Stefan had been there, always. Until 8 years ago, the ambush in that south side alley. Konstantin walked into a trap alone, never knowing it was there. Stefan appeared out of nowhere, like he had a sixth sense whenever Konstantin was in danger. 2 shots. Stefan threw himself in front of them. He went down, blood spreading red across the rain-soaked ground, and Konstantin knelt beside him, for the first time in his life not knowing what to do. My sister, Stefan rasped, his hand clamping around Konstantin's wrist, blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. Marin, you have to find her, protect her. Promise me. I promise, Konstantin had said, and that was the last time he ever spoke to Stefan Ashford. He'd searched for Marin for 8 years after that, hired the best investigators, bought information from every source, tore apart every record he could get his hands on. But she'd vanished like smoke off the face of the earth. No trace, no trail. He hadn't known Travis Hendricks had buried her in a rotten motel, cut her off from the world, turned her into a prisoner inside her own life. And now, 8 years later, he'd found her, lying in a hospital bed with a 60% chance to live, her body shattered by abuse, her spirit shattered by despair. He'd come too late. Again, Konstantin stared through the small window into Marin's room, at her still body under the pale blue glow of medical machines. I'm sorry, Stefan, he whispered into the dark. I tried, but I failed. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the snow that was still falling, and with it came the trouble Konstantin had known was coming. He was standing outside Marin's room, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, when footsteps sounded from the far end of the hall. Many footsteps. The kind that wanted to be heard. Webb led the group, his police uniform pressed crisp, his badge shining, a smug smile on his mouth. Behind him were 2 uniformed officers and a middle-aged woman in a gray suit, a file folder clutched to her chest, her face cold and blank. A social worker, or at least someone playing one. Willa was sitting on the sofa, just waking up, her eyes still heavy with sleep. When she saw Webb, when she recognized the police uniform, she shrank back like a small animal catching the scent of a hunter. She rushed to Konstantin and hid behind his leg, both hands gripping his pant leg like she was holding on to life. Webb stopped a few steps from Konstantin, pulled a sheet of paper from his jacket, and held it out. Mr. Volkov, I have a court order right here. A temporary guardianship order for Willa Ashford. She's coming with us. Konstantin didn't look at the paper. He looked straight into Webb's eyes. Who's the guardian? Travis Hendricks, Webb said, his voice slick as oil. Appointed by county court this morning. He's been caring for the child for the past 5 years. The court finds that's the most stable environment for her. Willa clung tighter to Konstantin's leg, her trembling voice small in the hallway. I don't want to go back with Travis. Please don't make me go. He'll hit me. He'll hit my mom. The woman in the gray suit stepped forward, her voice so sweet it sounded fake. Sweetheart, you're being influenced by strangers. This is a legal matter. The adults will handle it. You just come with me and everything will be fine. Konstantin stepped forward and positioned himself completely between Willa and the group. He pointed at the child's face, at the hand-shaped bruise on her cheek, still a deep purple. Do you see this? Her mother is lying in that room with 2 broken ribs, sepsis, and injuries all over her body. That's the stable environment you're talking about. What kind of law is that? Webb took 1 step closer and lowered his voice so only Konstantin could hear. Mr. Volkov, I know who you are. I know you've got power in Chicago. But this isn't Chicago. This is my county, my court, my police. You might be able to buy a whole city. But you can't buy the law. Konstantin stared at him, his eyes cold as ice. You think I can't do anything to you? Try me. Webb gave a thin smile. In front of 2 officers and a social worker. You're good, Volkov, but you're not that good. Now step aside, or I'll arrest you for obstruction. The air thickened. The 2 officers put their hands on their belts, close to where their cuffs hung. Jonas stood behind Konstantin, his body taut as a wire, ready for anything. Willa whimpered, her face pressed into Konstantin's leg, her whole body shaking. The tension was about to snap. Then a woman's voice cut through from the end of the hall, clear and commanding. What's going on here? Everyone turned. A woman around 35 walked toward them. Brown hair pulled back neatly, wearing a wool coat and slacks, a thick file in her hands. She wasn't pretty, but there was something in the way she carried herself, in her straightforward eyes that held no fear, that made people pay attention. She stopped in front of Webb, pulled an ID from her coat pocket, and held it up. Diana Cole, Illinois State Child Protective Services. I received a report from this hospital about a suspected child abuse case, and I'm conducting an investigation. Webb looked at her, and his smug smile flickered out. This is a county matter. You don't have jurisdiction. Diana Cole didn't blink. Under Illinois law, when there's suspected child abuse involving local authorities, state CPS has the right to intervene and oversee. She pulled a sheet from her file and held it out to Webb. This is my temporary hold order. Willa Ashford will remain at the hospital under the supervision of state CPS until the investigation is complete. Anyone who attempts to move the child before then will be considered as interfering with a federal investigation. Webb read the paper, his face shifting from red to white and back to red. He looked at Diana Cole, then at Konstantin, then back at Diana Cole. This isn't over, he said through clenched teeth. Not even close. He turned, signaled the 2 officers and the woman in gray to follow, and walked down the hallway with heavy, furious steps. The elevator doors closed behind them. Willa stayed hidden behind Konstantin's leg, crying without sound. Diana Cole stood still and watched until the elevator doors were fully closed. Then she turned to Konstantin. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, and it held none of the fear most people carried when they faced him. Mr. Volkov, I know who you are. Konstantin looked at her, his face giving nothing away. Then you know I'm not a good man. Diana nodded once. I do, she said flatly. I know you control half of North Chicago. I know you make your money in ways the courts would love to ask about. I know people say you kill without blinking. Konstantin didn't deny it. He only stood there and waited, because he knew there would be more. This woman hadn't come here just to tell him who he was. But I also know Travis Hendricks and Douglas Webb, Diana continued, her voice dropping a little. And I hate them more. Konstantin lifted an eyebrow, because that he hadn't expected. Diana glanced toward Marin's room, where the woman still lay motionless, then looked down at Willa, still hiding behind Konstantin's leg. 6 months ago, I got an anonymous report about Webb. Corruption, covering for abuse of power. I've been investigating ever since, but Webb's careful. He's got people everywhere, the local court, the police, even some people in my own office. Every time I find evidence, it disappears. Every time I find a witness, they pull their statement. So what do you want from me? Konstantin asked bluntly. Diana met his eyes without flinching. This case is an opening. A victim in the hospital with clear evidence of abuse, a child with an injury on her face, and a former cop Webb's been protecting. If I can build this case the right way, I can take Webb down with it. Konstantin understood. She needed his help, but she didn't want her hands dirty. Diana didn't deny it. Exactly. If you can help without your fingerprints ending up on anything I bring into court, I'll let you help. But if you do anything that gets this case thrown out, anything that lets Webb walk, I'll come back and deal with you afterward. You understand? Konstantin almost smiled. This one had nerve. He liked that. What do I need to do? I need a judge, Diana said. Someone outside Webb's county. Someone with authority higher than local court. And someone who isn't afraid of anyone. Not Webb. Not you. Do you know anyone like that? Diana nodded. Judge Catherine Moore, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. She's held that seat for 20 years and she's never bowed to anyone. Constantine went still. That name. He knew that name. 8 years ago, Judge Moore had presided over the last case connected to Stefan, a case Constantine had used, every connection he had to keep Stefan out of the system. She'd looked him straight in the eye in that courtroom and said, "I know who you are, Mr. Volkov, and I'm not afraid of you." She isn't afraid of Webb, Diana went on, as if she could read his thoughts. And she isn't afraid of you either. That's why she's the only one who can help. Constantine nodded once, decisive. I'll reach out to her. Diana pulled a business card from her coat and handed it to him. My number. When you've got anything, call me. She turned and started walking toward the doors, then stopped and glanced back at Willa, still tucked behind Constantine's leg. She's safe with you. At least for now. Don't make me regret trusting that. Then she walked away, her heels clicking steady against the hospital floor until the elevator doors closed behind her. That afternoon, Maren opened her eyes. Not the hazy, fever-glazed opening from before, but a real opening, conscious, aware. She looked around the unfamiliar room, the harsh white lights, the steady hum of machines, the sting of antiseptic in the air. A hospital. She was in a hospital. Then panic hit like a tidal wave. Willa. Where was Willa? She tried to sit up, her arm jerking so hard the IV needle nearly slipped free, and the monitor started screaming with frantic beeps. Willa, she called, her voice raw, weak, but full of desperation. Where's my daughter? Where's Willa? A nurse rushed in and tried to press her back down. Miss Ashford, you need to stay calm. You just woke up. You can't. But Maren didn't listen. She kept fighting to rise, her strength too thin to resist the nurse's hands, but strong enough to show she wouldn't stop. My daughter, she sobbed, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. Please, my daughter. The nurse looked out the door and nodded to someone in the hallway. A few seconds later, the door opened. Constantine stepped in, and beside him, holding tight to his hand, was Willa. The moment Maren saw her child, her body seemed to collapse, all the tension draining away until there was only tears. Willa let go of Constantine's hand and ran to the bed, climbed up, and threw her arms around her mother. Mom, you're awake. I was so scared. I thought you were going to die. Maren wrapped her daughter in her thin, trembling arms, pressed her lips to the child's hair, and cried until her face was wet. Are you okay? She asked, her hand stroking Willa's hair, her eyes searching her for every injury. Did he hit you? Are you hurt? Willa shook her head, her face pressed into her mother's chest. I'm okay, Mom. This man saved us. He brought you to the hospital. He gave me soup. He didn't let anyone take me. Maren lifted her head and, for the first time, looked straight at Constantine standing at the foot of the bed. She looked at him and, for a heartbeat, fear flickered in her eyes, the instinct of someone who'd grown used to men causing pain. But then she looked closer, into his eyes, and she recognized him. Constantine, she whispered, like she didn't believe her own voice. Stefan's friend. He nodded once, saying nothing. Maren went on, her voice trembling. He always talked about you. He said you were dangerous. Said the whole city was scared of you. But he also said you were the only one he trusted. He said if anything ever happened, I should find you. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I tried to find you. After he died, I tried to find you. But Travis, he took my phone, my papers. He wouldn't let me go outside. I couldn't reach anyone. Constantine stepped closer and pulled a chair up beside the bed, close enough to talk, far enough not to frighten her. Stefan saved my life, he said, his voice low and deep. Before he died, he told me to protect you. I've been looking for you for 8 years. I came too late, but I'm here now. Maren shook her head weakly, still holding Willa tight. You shouldn't get involved. Travis won't let this go. He's got Webb. He's got the police. You don't know how dangerous he is. Constantine looked at her, his expression unmoving. Travis isn't my concern. Webb isn't either. You just need to rest and get better. Maren looked at him, then looked down at Willa asleep in her arms. The child had drifted off, exhausted by the past days, her small face finally peaceful in sleep. When Maren looked back up at Constantine, Something had changed in her eyes. Not fear anymore, only acceptance, and a sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. "I know my body," she whispered, her voice calm, in a way that was almost frightening. "I can feel it. The doctors can say whatever they want, but I know. I don't have much time left." "Don't say that," Constantine cut in, his voice sharper than he meant it to be. "You're gonna get better." Marin shook her head, a sad smile on her mouth. "Don't promise what you can't keep." She paused, her hand smoothing Willa's sleeping hair. "But promise me one thing. Promise me that no matter what happens, you won't let Travis take Willa." Constantine looked at her, looked at Willa, then looked back at her. "I promise." That night, in the red brick house in the suburbs that Webb called home, two men sat facing each other at the kitchen table, dull yellow light spilling over their calculating faces. Travis drained his fourth can of beer, crushed it in his fist, then threw it to the floor. "I want the little girl back," he snarled. "She's mine. I raised her for 5 years. I fed her. I gave her a roof. Now that Russian thinks he can take her from me." Webb poured himself a whiskey, took a slow sip, his calm face the complete opposite of Travis's frenzy. "State CPS is investigating," he said, his voice cold as ice. "That Diana Cole bitch blocked me at the hospital. If you storm in now and demand the kid, you'll be arrested on the spot, and I won't be able to save you." Travis slammed his fist on the table, the beer can clattering to the floor. "So what am I supposed to do? Sit here and watch Volkov take what's mine?" Webb stared at him, eyes razor sharp. "Listen to me. If you hit this head on, you lose. But there's another way." Travis went still, breathing heavy, waiting. Webb set the whiskey down, leaned his elbows on the table, and lowered his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Tonight, you go into the hospital, take the kid, and get her across state lines. Indiana's a 3-hour drive from here. By sunrise, she'll be somewhere nobody can find her." Travis frowned. "How am I getting into the hospital? There's security, cameras, and Volkov's Jonas is outside the room." Webb smiled, the smile of a man who'd already thought through everything. "Night security is my guy. I called him already. At 2 in the morning, he'll shut off the 3rd-floor hallway cameras. The east side service door will be unlocked. You go in, grab the kid, out to a car waiting in the back lot. Drive straight to the safe house in Indianapolis. I've got people there who'll handle the rest. What about Jonas? I've already leaked your location to Volkov's rivals in Chicago," Webb added with a cold smirk. "They've been looking for a chance to draw him out, and their distraction will give us the window we need." "He's outside Marin's room, not the kid's," Webb said. "The kid's sleeping in the family waiting room, 20 meters away. You get in, you get out. He won't know until it's too late." Travis nodded slowly, the plan taking shape in his head. Then he paused, his eyes darkening. "And Marin?" Webb took another sip, his gaze hard as stone. "She's dying anyway. The doctor said 60% odds, which means 40% she dies." He set the glass down and looked Travis straight in the eye. "Let her die. One problem disappears on its own." Travis laughed, a rough, ugly sound. "And after that, when they ask where the kid is..." Webb leaned forward. "You're the court-appointed guardian. You say the kid was being influenced by Volkov, a mafia boss. You feared for her safety, so you took her to stay with relatives in another state. You're protecting her. You're the good guy in this story." Travis nodded, his grin spreading wider. 2AM, 2AM, Webb confirmed. "Don't bring a gun into the hospital unless you have to. Don't make noise. In. Grab the kid. Out. Quiet. Clean." Travis stood up, his eyes lit with the crazed shine of a man about to reclaim what he saw as his property. 2AM, he repeated. "She's coming back to me." St. Catherine Hospital sank into the night like a massive ship drifting through a sea of white snow. The hallway lights were turned low, only bright enough to see where you were going, and the steady pulse of medical machines drifted from patient rooms like the breathing of some enormous sleeping creature. Everything felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Constantine stood outside Marin's room, watching through the small window. She was asleep, and Willa was asleep too in the family waiting room 20 meters away. Everything seemed fine. Then his phone vibrated, the screen flashing bright in the dark. "Ilya," he answered. "Boss." Ilya's voice was rushed and broken, with noise bursting behind him. "The meeting with the Italians. It's a trap. There's a mole. I'm hurt. I need you here now. Constantine went still, every muscle in his body tightening. Where are you? Southside warehouse. I've got 3 guys. They've got more. I can hold for 20 minutes. If you don't get here. Ilya stopped, and gunfire cracked somewhere in the distance. Hurry. The call cut off. Constantine looked into Marin's room, then toward the waiting room where Willa slept. Ilya was his brother. Not by blood, but in every way that mattered. If Ilya died, he turned to Jonas, who stood beside him. Stay here. Watch both of them. Don't take your eyes off them. Jonas nodded. Understood, boss. Constantine moved fast down the hallway, his shoes striking a steady rhythm against the floor. He didn't want to leave. Every instinct in him was screaming for him to stay, but Ilya was bleeding somewhere in the night, and he couldn't let his brother die. Jonas would guard them. Everything would be fine. That was what he told himself as the elevator doors closed behind him. Jonas stayed outside Marin's room, his back against the wall, eyes scanning the corridor. He stood here because this was the most dangerous spot. If anyone wanted to do harm, they'd come for Marin. Willa was asleep in the family waiting room, 20 meters away, the door shut, safe. At least that was what he thought. Diana Cole had left that afternoon, promising to return in the morning to continue the paperwork. There was only one nurse on duty now, a young woman sitting at the station 30 meters away, her eyes fixed on a computer screen, and one security guard. A man posted at the end of the hall in a hospital security uniform, looking bored. Nobody knew that man had taken $5,000 in cash from Webb that afternoon. At 1:45 a.m., the guard glanced around once, making sure no one was watching, then walked to the camera control cabinet at the corner of the hallway. He opened it, found the right switch, and flipped it off. The third-floor camera indicator light went from green to red, then died completely. The surveillance monitors in the first-floor security room turned black, nothing but static. The guard closed the cabinet, returned to his post, and checked his watch. 2 a.m., 15 minutes. Outside the east side service door, a dark figure waited in the falling snow. 2 a.m. The east side service door opened without a sound, only January cold slipping in like invisible fingers. Travis stepped over the threshold, his shoes wrapped in cloth to muffle the noise, his shape melting into the dark hallway like a predator on the hunt. He knew the route. Webb had given him a map. 3rd floor, turn left. Family waiting room at the end of the hall. The corridor lights were so dim they were almost nothing. The cameras were off, and all that remained was the steady pulse of medical machines drifting out of patient rooms. Travis moved down the hallway with his back close to the wall, his eyes sweeping every door. He spotted Jonas standing outside a room 20 meters away. Jonas's back turned toward him, his attention facing the other direction. Perfect. Travis slipped into the family waiting room, eased the door open just enough for his large frame to pass through. Inside, a soft yellow nightlight washed over the sofa, where a small figure lay curled beneath a blanket. Willa. He moved closer, each step quiet as a cat stalking prey. The girl was sleeping hard, her face pressed into the pillow, her hand still gripping the edge of the black suit jacket Constantine had given her to cover up with. Travis bent down, one arm sliding under her body, the other ready to clamp over her mouth. Then he lifted Willa up, his hand sealing her mouth before she could make a single sound. Willa jolted awake, her eyes opening wide, blurry for a heartbeat, then terror snapping into place when she recognized the face above her. Travis. She thrashed, legs kicking wildly, her hands clawing at his face, trying to scream, but his big hand smothered her mouth so no sound could escape. "Be quiet," Travis whispered into her ear, his breath reeking of beer and cigarettes. "You can scream all you want. Nobody's coming to save you. You're mine. You've always been mine." He carried Willa out of the room and moved fast down the dark hallway toward the service stairs. Willa bit his hand, biting as hard as a 5-year-old could, tasting blood in her mouth. Travis cursed, his grip tightening until it hurt. But he didn't let go. Tears streamed down Willa's face, soaking the hand over her mouth. She remembered her mother telling her to be strong. She was trying, but she was only 5, and she was being dragged into the dark. In the hospital room, Marin was asleep, or at least she thought she was, but something yanked her back from the edge of dreaming, tugging hard, like someone had hooked a hand around her ankle. There was no sound. Nothing had changed. The machine still marked her heartbeat in steady rhythm. The nightlight still glowed dim. The hallway outside was still. But Marin opened her eyes. A mother's instinct, something that didn't need logic. something that didn't need explaining, something that only knew her child was in danger. She tried to sit up, her weak body protesting every movement, but she didn't stop. Her hand reached for the IV line and ripped the needle out of her arm, blood beating up, but she didn't feel pain. The monitor began to scream, the shrill beeping filling the room. She didn't care. She only knew she had to get to Willa. She staggered to her feet, her legs shaking like they might fold, one hand gripping the bed rail, then the wall. One step, another, to the door. A nurse hurried toward her from down the hall, panic in her voice. "Miss Ashford, you can't leave the bed. You have to." But Marin stumbled past her, clinging to the wall as she moved toward the family waiting room where Willa was sleeping. 20 meters, only 20 meters. She saw the door, open. She saw the sofa, empty. She saw Constantine's black suit jacket lying twisted on the floor like something had been ripped out of someone's hands. No, Marin trembled, her voice a horrified whisper. No, no, no. She spun her head, frantic, eyes sweeping the dim hallway. And then she saw it. At the far end, near the service stairs, a large, dark shape dragging a tiny one into the shadows. Willa was thrashing, legs kicking the air, but he was too strong. She couldn't break free. "Travis," Marin screamed, her voice raw with sickness but ringing through the silent corridor like an alarm bell. "Stop, give me my child." Travis turned his head. Willa turned too, and for one heartbeat, mother and daughter's eyes met in the dark. "Mom," Willa cried, her voice muffled but still trying to break through. "Mom." Jonas heard the scream from the end of the hall. He broke away from his post outside Marin's room and ran toward the sound, his gun already pulled from his jacket, but he was too far, and Travis was already close to the stairs. Travis turned and saw Marin at the end of the hallway, gaunt and shaking, her white hospital gown speckled with blood from the IV site she'd torn out. His eyes went dark, no surprise there, only the irritation of a man being interrupted. "You're not dead yet," he growled, his hand still clamped over Willa's mouth as she fought. "Get back in bed. I'm busy." Marin didn't go back. She lunged at him, with every scrap of strength left in her exhausted body, her bare feet slapping the ice-cold hospital floor. She grabbed the arm holding Willa, her nails raking his skin, her voice the roar of an animal protecting its young. "Give her back. Give her back." Travis slapped her. His big hand hit her face with enough force to fling her to the floor like a rag doll. Marin went down, her head cracking the wall, the world spinning, blood flooding her mouth. Willa screamed, muffled but still ripping through the darkness. "Mom! Mom!" Marin crawled back up. She didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe from the place every mother reaches when her child is in danger. Deeper than bone. Deeper than the will to live. She crawled to Travis and wrapped both hands around his leg, her voice begging and snarling at the same time. Don't take her. Kill me if you want, but don't take her." Travis looked down at her with contempt. He kicked her into the wall, the sole of his shoe slamming into her ribs, right where the two broken bones were trying to heal. Marin screamed in pain, her body folding in on itself, but her eyes never left Willa. "I gave you a roof," Travis said, his voice burning with the righteous anger of a man who believed he was in the right. "I fed you. I gave you a place to sleep, and this is how you pay me back. You run off with that Russian." Marin lifted her head, blood at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes weren't scared anymore. There was only contempt and truth. "You never gave me anything," she rasped, each word fired like a bullet. "You only took. You took my freedom. You took my dignity. You took everything I had. You're not a man. You're a monster." Travis roared, letting go of Willa as he grabbed Marin by the hair and yanked her off the floor. She screamed in pain, her feet dangling, her whole weight hanging from his fist twisted in her hair. His other hand closed around her throat, his fingers pressing right into the old bruises, the finger marks he'd left there before. "You want to die," he whispered, his face inches from hers, his breath rancid. "I'll help you." Willa saw her mother being strangled. She saw her mother's face go red, then purple. She didn't think. She only acted. She threw herself at Travis, swinging both tiny fists, pounding his leg, his thigh, anywhere she could reach. "Don't hit my mom," she screamed through tears, her voice tearing apart. "Don't hit my mom. I hate you. I hate you." Travis let go of Marin and she collapsed to the floor like an empty sack. He turned on Willa, his eyes animal mad. No reason left. No calculation left. He slapped her. Willa tumbled across the floor, her head striking the chair leg, and she lay still, not moving. Stop. Jonas's voice rang from the far end of the hallway, cold and sharp as steel. He stood there with his gun drawn, barrel aimed straight at Travis. Put them down. Hands up. Travis didn't raise his hands. Instead, he grabbed Willa's limp body and hauled her up as a shield against his chest. With his other hand, he pulled a gun from behind his back and pressed it to the girl's head. Back up, he screamed, eyes wild. Back up or I'll shoot. I swear I'll shoot. Constantine was driving like a madman through the curtain of snow when his phone vibrated. One of his people at the hospital, a nurse on the second floor he'd planted there a long time ago, spoke fast and tight into the line. The third-floor cameras are off. A stranger came in through the service door. There's screaming in the east hallway. He didn't hear the rest. He'd already slammed the gas down so hard the needle climbed into a number nobody should be driving at in a snowy night like this. He had reached the warehouse only to find the ambush was a calculated feint. Ilya, though clutching a bleeding shoulder, had realized the trap the moment the attackers retreated into the shadows. Go! Ilya had roared, shoving Constantine back toward his car. The hospital is the real target. 15 minutes. He didn't remember how he drove, didn't remember where he parked, didn't remember how many hallways he ran through. He only remembered his gun still holstered, his footsteps soundless, and the service stairwell door swinging open in front of him. He saw everything in a single heartbeat. Jonas at the far end of the corridor, gun aimed forward but unable to fire. Maren sprawled on the floor, blood at the corner of her mouth, her body motionless. And Travis, standing in the middle of the hall, one arm locking Willa to his chest like a human shield, the other hand holding a gun to the child's head. His eyes were crazed, his mouth open, screaming something Constantine couldn't hear. Constantine stepped out of the stairwell shadows, directly behind Travis, and his voice cut through the January cold like ice. Travis. Travis turned, eyes widening when he saw who was behind him. Constantine moved closer, slow and steady, like a predator that didn't rush because it knew the prey couldn't escape. His hands were empty. His face held no expression, but his eyes, those eyes, made Travis take a step back. Volkov, Travis snarled, trying to sound fierce, but his voice was already shaking. You think you can take what's mine? Who the hell do you think you are? Constantine didn't stop. Let the girl go, he said, each word laid out like a death sentence. I'll let you die fast. Travis gave a harsh laugh, the laugh of a man trying to hide fear. You think you scare me? Look. He tightened his grip on Willa, the barrel pressing into her temple. I've got the kid. You move. She dies. Constantine kept coming. You kill her. You die slow, he said, his voice no louder than a whisper, but it rolled through the hallway like thunder. 10 days. I'll do it myself. I'll start with your fingers, then your toes. Then the things you care about more. You'll beg to die by day 2, but I won't let you die until day 10. Anyone who'd ever seen Constantine's eyes knew that wasn't an empty threat. It was a promise. Travis began to truly shake, his gun hand no longer steady, sweat sliding down his forehead even though the hallway was ice cold. He took another step back, his eyes darting between Constantine and Jonas, searching for a way out. In that instant, when Travis's attention split, when the gun barrel shifted off Willa's head by the width of a fingertip, Maren moved. She didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe from the deepest place a mother has, the place even death can't touch. She surged up from the floor, both arms reaching out, wrapping around Willa, yanking her hard out of Travis's grip. Travis fired on reflex, his finger squeezing the trigger before his brain could even catch up with what was happening. The gunshot crashed through the hospital hallway like thunder. The bullet tore into Maren's back. She went down, collapsing onto the freezing floor, but her arms stayed locked around Willa, still holding her daughter, not letting go. If you're following this story, please hit like and subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. Now let's go back and see what happens after that fatal gunshot. Jonas fired. The bullet tore through Travis's shoulder, blood spraying as he screamed and dropped to the floor, his gun flying from his hand and skittering across the white tile. He lay there groaning, one hand clamped over the wound, but nobody looked at him. Nobody cared. Constantine stepped over Travis the way you stepped over trash. Without a glance, without a pause, he dropped to his knees beside Maren, his knees sinking into the spreading pool of blood pouring from her back, warm and red against the spotless hospital floor. Maren, he said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears, shaking, breaking. "Marin, open your eyes. Look at me." Marin opened her eyes, slowly, with effort. Stefan's eyes, the eyes Constantine had searched for over 8 years, were dull now, the light fading inside them like a candle running out of wax. Blood seeped from the corner of her mouth as she tried to speak, red drops spilling onto her chin, her throat, but her arms still held Willa tight, still not letting go. "Willa," she whispered, her voice breaking apart like a last breath shattering.